Hey guys, welcome back to Advanced Bass Fishing, and appreciate you guys swinging by the channel today to check it out. And guys, at the time of filming this video, we're in the month of May, and out of all the years I've been fishing, it seems like the month of May, we have the situation where you have rising water the most. It's like April and May, you get a lot of heavy rain. It's like usually in March and April, the ground gets sort of saturated, and then you happen to get, some weather systems that come through in May, and the lakes start to come up and they start to rise and they get high. And what I want to do in today's video is I want to talk about how to approach high water, specifically like in the months of May and June, give you guys some tips and advice on that. Definitely think it's going to add up to some nice fish for you guys. Also guys, before we get started, a couple quick things here just to remind you of anybody interested in booking a private on the water one-on-one lesson with me. All you got to do is go to my Facebook page, Intuitive Angling with Randy Blaukat. Shoot me a private message for that, and I appreciate that. And also, guys, thank you for everybody that's hit the subscribe button to Advanced Bass Fishing, signed up for all the stuff that we're doing here, using all the links I put in the every video description, especially all you guys that have been using and bookmarking my Tackle Warehouse link in every video description. Big thank you from the family. We appreciate that. Okay, I like fishing flooded high water. It's like, in fact, I love it, depending upon the situation, because not all flooded or not all rising water situations are the same. Here in my part of the country, we have a lot of fluctuation. I mean, our lakes will fluctuate 10 to 20 foot every year, depending upon the weather patterns that come through there. It's not like a lot of lakes where they hold fairly stable all the time. We get a lot of fluctuation. So I've had a lot of experience in fishing rising water situations. And there's not one situation that's the same for everything, because let's say, for example, if your lake is like 3 feet over normal, that offers one set of situations for you to encounter. And then sometimes, what if your lake is 15 feet over normal? That's completely different, because when you're talking about a lake that is 3 foot over normal, you're having some of the shallow perimeter cover that starts to get water into it, like some of the trees or the bushes that are close to the bank, they start to get flooded with water. And then if you are like 15 feet high, a lot of those trees and bushes that are along the water's edge are completely underwater, and the water gets flooded way back up into the flat stuff. So everything is all relative to exactly how high the water actually gets. Now, in general, here's what I have found for the most part. If the lake gets 3 to 5 foot above normal, that is the optimum conditions to catch bass in rising water during this time of year. If the lake gets higher than that, it gets really sketchy in terms of, under the right situations, you can capitalize on it and catch fish. But sometimes, based upon like the water clarity and how high the water came up and how quick it came up, it can be really, really tough. So I don't like those major, huge rises in the lake level. It usually makes the fishing a little bit tougher, but I do love those gradual, 3 to 5 foot rises in the lake level. That can be some of the best fishing of the year. Okay, here's a couple things to remember. First of all, don't expect that all of a sudden when the water starts to get flooded and starts to get high that there's a bunch of fish moving shallow. Because what happens more than not is a lot of the bass that are in a lake when the water starts to rise do not go shallow up into that flooded up into the flooded cover. They will stay right there around where that original shoreline is. In other words, let's say your lake comes up 6 or 7 feet, and you've got some bushes that are right along the bank in 6 or 7 foot of water. Those fish will stay right there at that original water level. They don't move up into that shallower cover. Sometimes they will a little bit, but not all of them do that. So there's been a lot of situations that I fished where the lake has come up a lot, where I get in there and I'm flipping and throwing a spinnerbait around bushes, not catching them, and there's some guy that's fishing behind me and is fishing the old shoreline, before the lake came up. They're whacking them on a football head jigger or Carolina rig. So a lot of those fish don't move up with the rising water. But let's talk about the ones that do. In general, what I have found in fishing, it's like when you have rising water, a lot of it, how the fish are positioned, has to do with the water clarity. If you have water visibility that is like less than 3 feet, you don't want a hard rise. It's not good. If you have a stained water situation, if you start getting more than 5 foot of water in those flooded bushes and flooded trees, the fish don't use them that much. But if you're in a clear water situation, say for example, if you're fishing like Beaver Lake in Arkansas, or maybe Bull Shoals or Table Rock around my part of the country, when that water comes up in the flooded trees, even if it's 10 foot high, the water can still be clear and you can still catch them out of that deeper flooded stuff. So it's all relative to that. Another thing with that is how do you want to approach it? The water level has a direct impact on the technique that you fish. Normally, if I'm fishing in a situation where the water is flooded 3 to 5 foot high, I'm using nothing but the flipping technique, flipping and pitching, creature baits, jigs, all that type of stuff. That's my ideal situation. I love it when the water's 3 to 5 foot high because it's perfect for flipping. Now, once you start getting higher than 5 foot, the flipping starts to go away a little bit unless the water is very, very clear. And if the water rises really fast and it's like 6, 7, 8, 10 foot above normal, the fish don't really use the interior cover as much as they do the exterior cover. So if the lake gets really high, a lot of times you can catch them like throwing a spinnerbait down the side of flooded cover, throwing a crankbait, throwing a chatterbait, something like that. Because in stained water, the fish don't need to go into that cover because they have enough cover with hanging out on the edges and the water's stained anyway. They don't feel the need to have to get really deep in that cover. So every situation is different in that. The approach that you have to use to it is basically, it has to do with several different factors: the water temperature, the water clarity, how fast the lake came up, and how high the lake is. That's going to determine your technique with that. And also, it's going to determine where you want to fish at. Because if you have a high situation where the lake's like 10 feet high, a lot of times you don't want to be in those flat areas because the fish they're so far back in there you can't even get to them. So if the lake is really high, I like to stay on steeper banks. That way, but you have a vertical rise and you still can get to the bank. If the water's real high, you can't do that on flat stuff. But if the water has risen like 3 to 5 feet, where it's not like super, super high, that's when I want to get on the flat stuff, because the flat stuff is going to have more cover. There's going to be more fishable cover in that flat stuff. Even if it goes back in there 50 or 100 feet from the old shoreline edge, it's still going to be fishable and be in the right depth of water. Ultimately, you're going to have to figure out the technique as far as how to catch them on. I've caught them on so many different baits when the water's flooded. All the soft plastics, all the jigs. I've caught them on floating worms. I've caught them on floating lizards, spinner baits, chatterbaits, topwaters, crankbaits. One of the best tournaments I ever had was many years ago down at Bull Shoals Lake in Arkansas. The lake was 25 foot high. So there was over 20 foot of water in some of these green trees that were flooded along the shoreline bank. And I figured out, and the water was clear, just super, super clear. And I was taking a rogue minnow and I was just reeling that rogue just barely under the surface, just like wobbling it next to the edge of those treetops, and wound up finishing second in a tournament down there, fishing that rogue. Just I could see him come out of the trees and get it. Super, super fun. But those fish were not on the bottom. They were suspended in the top of those things. So again, relative to the water clarity and how deep the trees are. So a lot of people don't like it. A lot of people don't like fishing flooded cover because it's sort of complex and there's a lot of variables to it. And a lot of people don't like to get up in that thick, gnarly brush and flip and pitch, but it can be some of the most exciting fishing of anything. If I could have one fishing situation that if you could say, Randy, okay, you can pick any way that you want to fish. What conditions do you want? It would be in the month of May, with the water about 3 to 5 foot above normal, the water visibility, probably 2 foot, something like that. Water temperature about 70 degrees, and I'll put on a jig and a creature bait, and I'll go flip those bushes and just have a ball doing it. So anyway, guys, that's a little bit of info there on the rising water. Hope it helps out. We'll talk later.